One of the most illogical and outdated pieces of British law that currently exists is the ban on cannabis. Now, a mother is urging the government to allow her 6-year-old son to be treated with the drug for a rare form of epilepsy. Alfie Bingley suffers up to 30 fits a day, but his seizures were cut in number and severity when he was treated with the cannabis oil in the Netherlands. But ridiculously, his mum faces a 14-year jail sentence if she gives Alfie the oil in Britain. What is this poor mother to do? The war on drugs has failed. It's time to legalise cannabis for medicinal purposes, but also for recreational use. It will help the sick, raise taxes, undercut criminal gangs, and keep people safe. What's not to like?
Maajid, I'm glad you raised the subject, and I agree with you. I think that this case of little Alfie is really heartbreaking, and it's very frustrating to know that there is a solution available that is not being offered here just because of, I think, outdated attitudes and bureaucracy. Now, I don't think we should be too dismissive about concerns about cannabis, but I think a lot of them are related to it being part of the underworld. You know, this idea that it leads on a downward spiral to harder and more dangerous drugs. I think there's lots of evidence in countries where it is regulated that actually that doesn't happen. I've just come back from California, where it's now outstripping agriculture as milk and dairy as one of the largest contributors to the economy. And in the US, where 9 states have legalised it, the medicinal cannabis market is worth more than $2 billion. So the potential is huge. But I just want to show you what Theresa May said about Alfie's case in the Commons this week.
I know that the sympathies of the members across the House are with Alfie and his family as he's undergoing treatment. And of course, people with chronic pain and debilitating illnesses, we recognise, will always look to alleviate their symptoms. But we do need to ensure that if we are going to if medicines are going to be permitted to be used, that they have been through the most rigorous testing, that we apply the most rigorous standards before those drugs are used.
This seems like a good moment to mention vaginas, because I don't know if any of you saw the story this week. I don't know if any of you saw the story this week, but these vaginal meshes that have been widely used on women who've given birth to treat incontinence have not been properly tested, and yet they've been used on women. And the idea that cannabis, where so much research has been done, that it's been talked about as a potential legal substance for so long, and we're depriving this child of something that could help him, and quite happily inserting these untested meshes into women. So I feel that there's a real double standard.
Can we talk about why it's not legalised in this country? And the reason is that cannabis is made up of 400 different chemicals. Before anything in this country is legalised for medicinal use, the chemicals have to be pure single chemicals, because what you have to do is monitor the effect, that you have to be able to monitor the effect that the drug has on you. And that's why it is not legal in this country. Also, cannabis has more carcinogens than tobacco in it. But you just mentioned California there. One of the biggest studies on cannabis in the entire world has just been conducted out there. It's the National Academy of Science, Engineering and Medicine. And it says it is warning of the very aggressive downsides of some cannabis use. They're talking about schizophrenia, schizophrenia, psychosis, respiratory problems. People taking cannabis have more car crashes than the average person. Now, while I get that Alfie's parents are devastated about this, I get it. If I had a child, I'd want to give it anything out there that was possible. But we can't, by legalising something, you are saying it's not dangerous. And we can't say that about cannabis, because we know it can be very dangerous.
There's so many assumptions in what you've just said.
Tell me what are the assumptions?
Let's start with this one. By legalising something, you're saying it's not dangerous.
Well,
that's simply not true. Nobody's saying that alcohol is not dangerous. Nobody's saying that tobacco is not dangerous. Hold on. So we're talking about regulating an industry. The studies you've cited, this is why it's so incredibly frustrating for me, because the debate around cannabis and its legalisation and regulation is so culturally biased. It's unbelievable. Studies prove, now Lancet in 2010, a peer-reviewed medical journal, basically demonstrated that by all criteria that you could possibly consider, tobacco and alcohol are far worse for you, are far more dangerous for society, produce far more crime than the legalisation of cannabis would. As for road traffic incidents, where it has been legalised in Colorado State, in Washington State, in Oregon and in Alaska, they found not only did teen use of cannabis remain the same, crime went down and road traffic incidents were not affected.
I mean, we're ending up just arguing, throwing stats at each other, aren't we, and trying to argue that. I mean, what is clear about this country is that we've got, our drugs policy, we've got wrong. There's no doubt
the war
about
on
it.
drugs has failed.
There are
There's
now.
been no
It's
war
failed.
on drugs.
No,
there
hang on.
hasn't been
Of course there's been a war on drugs.
Carol, please, just let somebody else say something. What we've seen for years, I mean, cannabis has been in use by many, many people in this country for years. And actually that brings the law into disrepute, really, because actually it's ignored. And even the police now ignore it.
That's why there hasn't been a war on drugs.
What I would say to Alfie's mum is, you can obtain this, do it. No one's going to take any action. I've got a mate at the moment who is suffering. I've got a mate who has been diagnosed with cancer, who is taking liquid cannabis every day because he believes it will help.
I don't think we should encourage people to break the law. Also, because child services may get involved. The problem is the law, and I really feel for her. And actually, the problem is that she could face 14 years in jail for treating her suffering child.
She won't get 14
Carol,
years in
what are we
jail.
going to do?
When was the
Encourage her
last
to break
time
the law?
anyone was put into jail for cannabis, Maajid? It just doesn't
But when was the
happen.
last time children were taken away from parents for drug consumption? That is a danger.
It won't happen. And
So what, are we telling her to disrespect the law? Is that what we're saying?
The cops turn a blind eye.
Michelle, come on, you can.
Right, so I am very anti-recreational drugs for personal reasons. I don't like them. But I've spent a lot of time looking into cannabis, and I've reached the conclusion that actually it should be legalised. Now, firstly, to make it legal for medicinal purposes, that's not a change to law, it's a rescheduling of the drug to move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. That's the first thing that could happen very simply and very easily, to allow that drug to remain illegal for street use, for example, but legal for medicinal purposes. That's the first thing I think should happen, and cases like Alfie, etc., just demonstrate that again to me. When it comes to recreational use, one of the challenges, and I've had personal experience of somebody that's had very bad mental health issues because of cannabis use, but the type of cannabis that he was using was skunk. It was a very, very potent, strong form of cannabis. If you legalised cannabis, you could actually have controls around simplifying it, essentially the ingredients of cannabis. You could apply taxation to it on a gradual level, so just bear with me. So you could tax it at a gradual level in the way of alcohol, so the stronger and more potent the cannabis, the higher the price, the higher the taxation, the higher the price. So you could essentially create like if you've got shandy at one level of alcohol and then you've got vodka or tequila or whatever at the other end, you could have like a sliding scale, the lowest potency of cannabis being, cheaper and therefore much accessible to people to use. So I think that adults should be able to use cannabis for recreational choice if they wish. And there's a really interesting think tank called Voltfast, which looks into this, and they absolutely bang the drum for this. And if you read some of their stuff, it's fascinating, and they've changed my view on it.
The second reading of the bill is tomorrow, actually, in Parliament. Labour MP Paul Flynn proposed a bill. Its second reading for medicinal purposes. It's called the Legalisation of Cannabis Medicinal Purposes Bill, is read tomorrow. And Norman Lamb, who was quite a good health minister by all accounts, made the very point you've made about the dangers of not knowing what's in the drug if it remains illegal, whereas by regulating it, let's just hear what he had to say. Let's just hear what Norman Lamb had to say.
If you're buying in a criminal market, you have no idea what you're buying. You have no idea of the potency of what you're buying, how dangerous it is. It's so much safer. It protects young people so much more if we can regulate it in a sensible and rational way.
Now, alcohol and tobacco are both bad for adolescents and people that are still developing, likewise with cannabis, but there's no proven long-term effect on adults when they consume cannabis.
I've been trying to make this point for ages. But the point about, does anybody actually believe around this table that if you legalise cannabis or any other drug, that the drug dealers are going to suddenly become model citizens overnight? They are not, because what's going to happen if the government starts selling it, if we start taxing it, the drug dealers are going to be there and they're going to undercut the price, and they're going to bring stuff in that they have now, and the dangers will still be the same.
We have a precedent for that, and of course I know that's why you want to come back on something, but we have a precedent on that, and that is prohibition. At the end of the day, when alcohol was banned, crime spiralled out of control, and when prohibition was lifted, it was brought back into control again. Crime never went away, but it is
Mafia never went away either.
Carol, it is certainly reduced when you pull the rug from under the feet of the gangsters.
But I just feel that this is a bit of a false comparator, because we're comparing cannabis to alcohol and other drugs, but we're talking about cannabis for medicinal use. And Carol, you know, you raised the fears about side effects. We should be comparing cannabis for medicinal use to other drugs that are used to treat health conditions, many of which have extremely dangerous and debilitating side effects. And when we use substances for medicinal purposes, we accept that they do have side effects and they cause other health risks. That's the balance. Think about chemotherapy,
you know what,
and how damaging that is to your health. Now, sometimes you need to be able to conduct a rational cost-benefit analysis of what you can get from a drug versus the cost, and that's what we should be doing.
With other drugs, you know what the side effects are going to be.
And we will if it's regulated.